Good afternoon, Mr. Zakaria. My name is Lee Kenzhen, and I will be presenting to you the introduction of one of the seven wonders of the world, Machu Picchu. First off, Machu Picchu is a well-known traveling site which is located in the northwest of Cuzco, Peru. The word Machu Picchu means Old Peak or Old Mountain if translated to the language of Quechua, hence the name Machu Picchu. The place was founded by an archaeologist by the name of Hiram Bingham, along with his explore team who was in search of Vilcabamba. And it is believed that the Machu Picchu was either a royal estate or a sacred religious site for the Inca leaders, and it was also ruled by the Inca Empire.
Thank you, Ivan. Machu Picchu was founded by Inca ruler Pachacuti around 1440. Machu Picchu was still inhabited when the Spanish conquered Peru in 1532. It is found that Machu Picchu is not an ordinary city, but a rural retreat for the Inca nobles around the courtyard. There is a huge palace, a temple dedicated to Inca gods, and other houses for maintenance personnel. It is estimated that the number of people living in Machu Picchu does not exceed 750 at the peak, and even less in the rainy season when there is no nobles visit. The Inca kingdom chose to establish a city here because of its unique geography and geology. The outline of the mountain behind Machu Picchu is said to represent the face of the Inca looking up at the sky, while the highest peak of the mountain, Wana Picchu, represents his nose. Next, I will pass to Carrie.
Thanks, Julie. Next, I will continue to talk about the second slide, which also the background of Machu Picchu. When Peru was colonized by Spain in the mid-16th century, Flores has long held that there is a mysterious Inca city in the mountains of the Andes. For more than 300 years, explorers searched in vain. Machu Picchu, known as the lost city of the Inca emperors, was unknown to the Spanish during more than 300 years of colonial rule and untouched for 100 years after Peru's independence. Machu Picchu was new to the world because of July 24, 1911 year. Hira Pinhan III, an American historian and professor of Yale University, was brought to Machu Picchu by Peruvian locals. After returning home, the historian published a book to introduce the mystery Machu Picchu to the world. Machu Picchu is not the real name of the city. Archaeology could not know its original name, so they borrowed the name of a nearby mountain and called it Machu Picchu.
Thank you, Carrie. Here comes the technology that used while building the Machu Picchu building. The first one is the dancing stone. The stone that used have lack of mortar allowed the stone to move in the rhythm of the earth motion instead of breaking due to being rigid. That's why so much of Machu Picchu is intact and still with us today. Besides, no metal tools and no wheels make people confuse how they transport the finished blocks to the site. People believe that there are only two ways to make it happen, which is wrap the blocks with thick ropes or the brute strength physically fit man. The third amazing technology that used in the Machu Picchu is their water and sewage system. Everything from the distance of the channels to the angle of inclination correspond exactly to the sum of running water and the possibility of accumulating rainwater. Next, I will pass it to Sheldon.
Thank you, Kelvin. I'm Rolly Shen, and now I will talk about the art of Machu Picchu. The construction of the main buildings in Machu Picchu were typical of Inca traditional style architecture. From the house to terrace, they were built by carefully fitting individual stones against each other. Terrace were a common element of highland agriculture long before the Inca. The Inca carved agricultural terrace from the steep mountain slope to produce food needed for the city. And the stone walls have been individually shaped to fit closely with one another rather than shaped into similar units. The entryways of the building were also in a unique Inca shape of trapezoid. Furthermore, the Intihuatana, which what they call teaching post of the sun, was carved from a large boulder on the high platform. It may express the importance of earth and sun in Inca spiritual tradition. And there are also the observatory, which what they call the temple of the sun. Thank you. Now I will pass to Jonathan.
The Incan Empire believed in the sun god. They established a perfect agricultural system, unfortunately until they suddenly disappeared. Machu Picchu is a city. The reason for the disappearance of civilization are as follows. In year 1532, Machu Picchu Incan civilization disappeared when hundreds of Spanish colonies invaded. In addition, Inca cities are destroyed by the Spanish colonies and buildings and tombs covered with Inca cultural symbols were also destroyed.
Thank you, Jonathan. The Machu Picchu is now one of the most famous man-made wonders, and it is definitely a tourist attraction that leads to hundreds of thousands of tourists every year. And because of that, neighbor towns and cities are gradually developing and growing, thus creating a new and better home for some of the endangered species. If people are planning to enjoy a spectacular view of the sunset over a towering zone, the Machu Picchu is definitely a place to consider a visit. That's all for our presentation. Thank you, Mrs. Zakaria.